Well, the virus has now killed more than 100 people in China, and new cases have been confirmed around the world.
So you don't want to frighten the American public.
France and South Korea have also got evacuation plans.
But you need to prepare for and assume
strongly warning Americans to avoid all non-essential travel to China.
That this is going to be a real serious problem.
France, Australia, Canada, the US, Singapore, Cambodia, Vietnam, the list goes on.
Health officials are investigating more than 100 possible cases in the US.
Germany, a man has contracted the virus.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
Japan, where a bus driver contracted the virus.
Coronavirus has killed more than 100 people there and infected more than 4,500.
We have to prepare for the worst, always, because if you don't and the worst happens.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
When is the time? Well, in your written statement, you say, now is not the time to pull back on masking, physical distancing, and avoiding congregate settings. When is the time? When do Americans get their freedom back? Can you put your microphone on, please?
Sorry. When we get the level of infection in this country low enough that it is not a really high threat.
What is low enough? Give me a number. What, I mean, we had 15 days to slow the spread, turned into 1 year of lost liberty. What metrics, what measures, what has to happen before Americans get their freedoms back?
My message, Congressman Jordan, is to get as many people vaccinated as quickly as we possibly can to get the level of infection in this country low that it is no longer a threat. That is when. And I believe when that happens, you will see.
What determines when?
I'm sorry.
What measure? I mean, are we just going to continue this forever, or when do we get to the point? What measure? What standard? What objective outcome do we have to reach before Americans get their liberty and freedoms back?
You know, you're indicating liberty and freedom. I look at it as a public health measure to prevent people from dying and going to the hospital.
You don't think Americans' liberties have been threatened the last year, Dr. Fauci? They've been assaulted. Their liberties have.
I don't look at this as a liberty thing, Congressman Jordan.
Well, that's
I look
obvious.
At this as a public health thing.
But
I disagree with you on that.
You think the Constitution is suspended during a virus, during a pandemic? It's certainly not.
This will end, for sure, when we get the level of infection very low.
For a year, American citizens haven't been able to come to their capital to petition their government, to talk to their representatives, and freedom of the press. These very pictures that Representative Scalise just showed you and talked about, guess what? The press isn't allowed in those facilities. The press is not, the Biden administration will not let the press in there. And certainly freedom of speech. I mean, freedom, governor of our third largest state meets with physicians, and that video is censored because they dare to disagree with Dr. Fauci. So I just want to know, when do Americans get their First Amendment liberties back?
You know, I don't think anything was censored because they felt they couldn't disagree with me. I think you're making this a personal thing, and it isn't.
It's not a personal thing.
No, you are. That is exactly what you're doing.
No, your recommendations carry a lot of weight, Dr. Fauci. We just had the chair of the Financial Services Committee said she loves you and you're the greatest thing in the world.
My recommendations are consistent.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, it's my
Now, could I answer the question, please? My recommendations are not a personal recommendation. It's based on the CDC guidance, which is
and I'm asking the question, what measures have to be attained before Americans get their First Amendment liberties back?
I just told you that.
No, you haven't given anything specific. You said, we hope when this tell me specifically.
Right now, we have about 60,000 infections a day, which is a very large risk for a surge. We're not talking about liberties. We're talking about a pandemic that has killed 560,000 Americans.
I get that,
what we're talking about.
And I don't disagree with that. And I understand how serious that is. But I also understand it's pretty serious when businesses have been shut down. People can't go to church. People can't assemble in their own homes with their friends, with their families. People can't go to a loved one's funeral. People can't get to their government, petition their representative to redress their grievances. Right. I also understand the First Amendment's pretty darn important. And it's been a year. And I want to know when Americans will get those First Amendment liberties back.
Well, you just said people cannot assemble in their own homes. They can. That's a CDC recommendation for vaccination.
Not last fall, they couldn't.
I didn't hear.
Not last fall, they couldn't.
I didn't hear what he said.
Time has expired. I'll give you one instance of when we can get our liberties back. It's when 90% of the members of the United States Congress get vaccinated.
Well, I want to know if that's what Dr. Fauci is. It 90%?
That's what
Dr. Fauci? Is it 90%? That's what I'd like to know. Give us some objective standards versus when certain things get reached, we might be able to get back to having our liberty. When? What are the numbers?
Well,
You're going to see a gradual, right now we're at an unacceptably high level. On a daily basis, it's unacceptably high, regardless of who you are. What you're going to see as more and more people get vaccinated, and we get over 3 million people a day, you're going to see the level of infection come down, and gradually flexibility for doing the things that you're talking about.
Where does it get to? When it comes down, what number do we get our liberties back? Tell me the number. Tell me the number.
When 90% of the members of Congress get vaccinated.
But you're not a doctor, Mr. Clyburn. He is. What is the number?
I can't
Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Clyburn. Thank you.
Chair now recognizes for 5
I'd
minutes.
like my question
Ms.
answered.
Milano.
Reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time.
Regular order.
No,
Just a moment.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want you to answer my question. The American people want Dr. Fauci to answer the question. What does it have to be?
Expire, sir. If you need to respect the chair and shut your mouth.
That last is in Denmark. One of the health officials talking about that. I guess it's Denmark's never going to, not going to use one of the vaccines ever again, and she fell out. But before that, that's your nation. That's your nation's capital. On the CCP virus, the virus that came from the Wuhan lab. It's Thursday, the 15th of April, the year of our Lord 2021, the 12th anniversary of the founding of the Tea Party, but the 73rd anniversary of the founding of the State of Israel. And in the United States, chaos. Jim Jordan, one of the best, most straightforward congressmen we have in the United States Congress, asking just pretty basic questions for the data-based, evidence-based, science-based Saint Dr. Tony Fauci. And all you get is spin, all you get is happy talk. But ladies and gentlemen, and we've been on Dr. Fauci since the 23rd, 24th, 25th of January of 2020 of being a phony and a charlatan. Okay? My first guest, the great Dr. Peter Navarro, going to bring a second, had a confrontation with this phony a couple of days after that in the Situation Room in the White House, in which Dr. Peter Navarro saved millions. Dr. Peter Navarro, yes, Dr. Peter Navarro, a social scientist, an economist from Harvard, went after Dr. Fauci, supposed to be one of the top guys in the world about this, and Fauci wanted no border shut down, no flights from China shut down, nothing shut down. They almost came to fisticuffs. Peter Navarro's memo carried the day with Donald J. Trump, and that's why millions of Americans are still alive today. We don't need Tony Fauci lecturing people about 500,000 when there's blood on his hands. Right? We were taking that for YouTube or whatever, and I don't care. We don't care if you're on YouTube. I'm not making any money on YouTube anyway. Taking that by YouTube, by the head on the pikes. Josh Rogan, the best sourced reporter in this city for the Amazon Bezos Washington Post, the author of Chaos Under Heaven, still the definitive history of the Xi-Trump confrontation over the last 4 years, no matter what Fantasy McMaster's writing about in Politico, right? The definitive book. Today, he's out saying, hey, it's not going to be too much longer that the mainstream media can cover, and he called him St. Fauci, I think it was. There's going to have to be an adult discussion about what went on with NIH and the Wuhan lab and the money that transferred and the support of these gain-of-function experiments. So being data-based, being evidence-based, being science-based, like we are here in the War Room, I now want to bring in, we've got a jam show today, and a lot of people we want to have on here we can't because there's so much breaking news. I got to bring in Dr. Peter Navarro. Navarro, what people see right there with Jim Jordan, understand that this is the kind of thing that went on in the White House with Dr. Peter Navarro playing the Jim Jordan role and Fauci being Fauci. So, Dr. Navarro, I'll let you take it from there. You've been in this situation of trying to pin this guy down to actually give you a number or a range of numbers. Sometimes, it can't be 85 or 90%. It has to be a range. But the logic in back of his answers, not the spin and not the happy talk, and the American people saw it today in high relief. You can't get a straight answer from this. Nothing but happy talk. Dr. Navarro, you take it from there.
All right. So, first of all, as you can see, I'm wearing in homage to Jim Jordan, the Jim Jordan outfit. That is the guy who needs to be Speaker of the House in 2022. Amen. This is the man,
amen, brother,
who will stand up for the people of America and speak in a clear, articulate, and forceful manner and not back down, juxtaposed against Kevin the Waffle McCarthy, who saved Liz Cheney's bacon from the fire. She remains in leadership despite all of the abominations that she does. Now, Mr. Fauci, Dr. Fauci, St. Fauci, January 28th, 2020. I really want to stress this, Steve. I go into the Situation Room and I sit down at a table, and there's 30 people in the room. Mulvaney's down at the end of the table, Chief of Staff leading this whole thing. We got Pottinger there, and there's 3 people across from me, right in the middle, just by chance, right across from me is a guy. I didn't know who he was, never met him before. There were no name tags, right? I just took the guy's measure based on what came out of that dude's mouth. And what came out of that dude's mouth that day was travel bans don't work, and I'm opposed to the travel ban. This is what this guy says to me over and over again. I walked out of that room not knowing that this guy's excrement didn't smell, that he was revered around the world as some god. And all I could think, Steve, was this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And I saw that again today with Jim Jordan. I saw it in my repeated interactions with Tony Fauci. And it's criminal what the media has done in lionizing this guy, making him kind of the Delphic oracle that people worship before. And you just can't get a straight answer out of him. All we want to know, all Jim Jordan wants to know is, what are the metrics? What's the science? What's the data? When we hit this, can we go back to church? When we hit this, can we send our kids to school? When we hit this, can we get back on an airplane and go to Europe? Fauci has nothing to tell us about this. And he goes, it's not a liberty thing. Really, Tony? Not a liberty thing? The way we've got the left in control of this government now, using vaccine cards as a social credit score, just like in communist China. So good for Jim Jordan. Let's get him in. Let's win the House back. Let's get him in as the leader. And Fauci needs to be held accountable. And again, behind me, radio audience, it's the house that Fauci built, the Wuhan Virology Lab. The only thing I wish about today was if Jordan had asked him why he allowed genetic engineering with U.S. taxpayer money to likely create the Fauci virus.
That's, by the way, that's coming. It is the Fauci virus, courtesy of the.
It is the Fauci virus. Yeah,
100%.
It is the Fauci virus.
The media is going to go down. They got to go down with this ship now because they're so invested in St. Tony Fauci. Dr. Navarro, since we had a 5 or 6 minute cold opening, I would ask you to stay over for the next segment. We're also going to have Natalie Winters from National Pulse, another massive breaking story in National Pulse. We got David Clements, one of the top experts on the Steal the Vote. Also, Doug Wardlow, who's running for Attorney General in Minnesota, about the activities up there. A jammed-packed hour here in the War Room. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we return, we'll have Dr. Peter Navarro to finish up about Dr. Fauci, herd immunity, vaccine passports, and vaccines next in the War Room.
And you are over, 'cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more.
Today, you have a public offering of CoinDesk today. You've got Bitcoin going over $1 trillion. You got the Chinese Communist Party is now issuing its own digital currency from its central bank. The entire focus on the CCP is to destroy the U.S. dollar. What does this mean for you in your life? It means you've got to get focused on alternative investments. The key is gold and silver. How do you find that information? You have to go to Birch Gold. So here's what I want you to do right now. Type in Bannon, Bannon, to the following number, 484848. That is Bannon, Bannon, and send it to the following number, 484848. You get a 20-page brochure from a company that has a A-plus rating by the Better Business Bureau. They're the best experts in gold. They got all kind of programs from tax advantage to just straight-out ownership. But go there today, make your own decision. But here's the action you need to take. You need to go to Bannon, Bannon, and text it to the following number, 484848. Birch Gold. Do it today. Do it now. Thank you very much.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, Mike Lindell, they're launching the new site, Frank. They're going to have this big Franken 2-day, 48-hour Frankathon where they put out all this evidence he's done for the Stop the Steal, new evidence he's got, analytical evidence. He says ties it back to the Chinese Communist Party. People will see when he puts forward the evidence, but it's Mike Lindell. Support Lindell, support MyPillow, the great manufacturing company in Minnesota. Go to mypillow.com right now. Promo code War Room. Get in there. You got sales discounts on everything, up to 66% on some sheets, slippers now. Big sales on those, so go there now. Support War Room, Lindell, and MyPillow. Okay, we got a lot to get through. Okay, and this is for the audience. Since we're having a partners discussion with the audience, with the posse. The reason we do this show is to give you the same type of advice you would get in boardrooms, in the Kennedy room, the National Security Council, in the Oval. This is what we try to do, lay out the information. This is why we talk about nomenclature, process, critical path, intellectual constructs, kind of forming your own mental map. So you make your own decision, but you have the architecture, the architectonics of how decisions are made. It's the reason I love Dr. Peter Navarro. Think about it. Peter Navarro's got the great report up there on immigration and the border. He's got the great report on the Stop the Steal, and he's the number one guy on the vaccine, on the virus and the vaccine, all that. Why is that? He's a social scientist. He's an economist from Harvard, PhD from Harvard, but he understands kind of how to think like that. Those are constructs, and this is puts forward. Right? Now, I went to the business school across the river. That's more of a trade school. He's more of an intellectual. But, Doctor, this is what I think is confusing. This is what I want the audience to understand. Fauci can't answer that. Jim Jordan's asking him a question to kind of walk us through what the plan is, but what the idea is the plan is based upon. What is the construct? Just tell us that. And then give us a number. And he reverts to his default position is vaccines. I got to get jabs in the arm, but no other numbers. I got to get jabs in the arms. You were there. Yeah. And whether you love the Trump administration or hate it, at least you guys had a theory of the case. What is the Biden administration's construct? What is their theory of the case here?
Let me start with Fauci himself. The fundamental man's character determines his fate, and the character of Fauci is a cover your ass, extremely risk averse bureaucrat. And when he was the czar during the AIDS epidemic, he was accused, and I think correctly, for killing over 15,000 gay men with AIDS because of the kind of risk aversion that he's exhibited throughout this whole pandemic. And when he won't answer that straight question to Jim Jordan, his risk aversion is holding him back from being able to say, yeah, once we hit this threshold, we're going to be okay. Our fate is Fauci's character, and it's a bad fate right now. Now, the construct here, if I'm in the Oval now and I'm sitting in front of the president, I'm saying, look, vaccine's fine. Let's get it out there. Let's do what we can. But it may not work. against the mutations. It may not work for a long period of time, so we're going to keep having to do it over and over again. And what we really need to be doing in addition, and I've always said this, is to do a big Operation Warp Speed on the therapeutics to take effectively death off the table. I'll be honest with you, Steve. If I had a choice between a therapeutic I knew that if I got sick, I could take it and I'd have a mild case and be done with it versus a vaccine, which may or may not work, I'd take the therapeutic every time. My point here, Steve, is that the Biden administration, it's like they watched us like deal with a very complex problem and dumped all over us. But now Biden, he's bought this now, and he's put all his money on this vaccine being the panacea that's going to take us out of this whole problem, and it's not going to work. So he's struggling. Fauci's lost, and they don't have a construct, which is the answer to your question. They don't know how to think about this.
They never mention people that have had it in the herd immunity. Jordan's asking, kind of get me to the herd immunity number. Is it 90%? Is it just get it to me? What's the herd immunity? Because then I know we're home free. Are they one of the reasons
what's going on in
Go
Fauci's
ahead.
mind? Fauci's going through all the options, and he's going, well, I don't know if the vaccine's going to work, and we probably that's in his mind. But he won't be honest with the American people about that. So instead, what he does is dissemble. And when he's on friendly turf in the corporate media, they make him out to be a saint. Whatever he says, he's the Delphic Oracle, meaning that he spouts platitudes, and people in the country read into what they want and feel comforted. But as time goes on, people aren't being comforted anymore. They're being confused by him. They're seeing a man who's not up to the job right now, and they're seeing a White House. We handed over a great vaccine program with mass production, and basically they're bumbling it. They're failing it. Now Pfizer comes out. They want to do a third shot. Hey, this may be all about Big Pharma making a bunch of money as well. And a guy like Fauci, he's not there for 40 years unless.
It wasn't laid out to people beforehand. The last question. And I want to bring Natalie Winters in here right now. Hang on. Are they not including people that have had the virus in herd immunity? Is there implied definition of herd immunity? You got to get a shot, because if it's 90% on a shot, somebody's got to tell the American mothers that mathematically, the way this works out, the kids are going to have to get vaccinated. And Fauci said that a month ago. AP picked that story up, and Yahoo made it their number one story for a day and then took it down. Is your understanding that he refuses to include people that have had it? Is that because of the new variants coming out? Has there been any explanation why? Because when Hatfield and guys were here in the war room, the biggest part of herd immunity would be people that had it and had antibodies. Is the Biden administration telling the American people it can only get to herd immunity with a jab? That's why you see CNN saying red states are falling behind, evangelical Christians are the problem, etc. Do they not include people that have had the virus in the herd immunity calculation?
I think we're falling back into politicizing the virus yet again. And what Biden's pollsters are seeing is that there's a pretty good majority of people who believe in the nanny state that everybody should be forced to get a vaccine. So they're riding that. But that's dangerous. They do not count people who have already had the virus as being effectively vaccinated, although you get the same result. You get the same antibodies that probably last for the same time. Now let's think about that, right? Let's think about that for a minute. So this is a White House and a Fauci. They're really struggling because they have no metrics. They're risk averse. They think the vaccine's going to ride all of us to the rescue. It's simply not. And meanwhile, let's not forget, south of the border, that border's open now, and a whole lot of herds coming up. I didn't hear Fauci talking about that in the context of there's too many infections.
Let me just disagree. Let me disagree with you just on the median one thing. Chris Hayes the other night, you could see it in his eyes. He said, this guy is a spin artist, and if I had to ask him the hard questions I would ask anybody else, he would falter. And Josh Rogan today, who knows China better than anything, the mainstream media and Sanjay Gupta, you can see it in their eyes. They're saying, hey, we can't hang it on this guy anymore.
I think you missed the point when I said that people are beginning to turn on him. What he's saying is, no, the Delphic Oracle is turning into something quite different. He's more like the Wizard of Oz. You know, it's like the little guy behind that curtain. There's no there. He's Gertrude Stein's Oakland. Look, behind me, let's not forget, the Wuhan Virology Lab. Fauci paid for the lab. He allowed Chinese communists to genetically engineer weaponized viruses. And if that virus did escape from this lab, which I believe it did, Robert Redfield believes it did, Sanjay Gupta believes it did, then Fauci is the father of the virus. So there's going to be a moment, but it's like I'm worried about the Biden White House right now, because if you think about it, Steve, they don't really have anybody who gives them good, steady, solid advice. I mean, the CDC woman's unhinged. I mean, she's like, she'd have all of us kind of sit in our basements again. Fauci doesn't know what he's talking about. Francis Collins over at the NIH is just a big pharma puppet. Who's at the FDA? It's like, name me somebody in the Biden administration who is trustworthy right now to give you an honest
I fear for the country. I fear for the country.
This is the point where you damn well should.
Yeah, Chris Hayes, who's Rachel Maddow's mini-me, right? You saw it the other day in his eyes. He said, "Hey, he says, oh, we just do the science, put the science." He says, "Hey, isn't there something on the other side of the ledger? Don't you have to make informed decisions?" You're starting to see it all come unraveled, okay? And I fear for the country. Okay, Dr. Navarro, I want you to give your social media course how they get. Hang on, you made a Gertrude Stein was an analogy. You got to come at 5 o'clock to the War Room to kind of get the real depth of Dr. Peter Navarro.
It's a famous Gertrude Stein beatdown of Oakland, California. There's no there, right? That's Fauci. He's gone from the Delphic Oracle to Gertrude Stein's
Don't beat
Oakland.
down Jack London's hometown. Don't beat down Oaktown, okay? How do you get, real quickly, 30 seconds, how do you get to your social media?
PeterNavarro.com for all the good reports that are out there, and Real P. Navarro on Twitter. Although, if you're on Twitter, make sure you get on Gab and all the other things, too, and diversify your portfolio so you don't get canceled.
CNN took down Project Veritas, James O'Keefe today. We'll get more information on that.
Sure
okay, we'll come back.
I'm sure they
We got Murderers Row next. Natalie Winters, David Clements, Doug Wardlow. All next in the War Room.
We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, whether you think this virus came from the P4 lab in Wuhan as part of a bioweapons program, or if you think it's a total and complete hoax, or anywhere in between, over the last year in the War Room of 15 months, you know that you must take responsibility for boosting your own immune system. Go to warroomdefense.com today. Warroomdefense.com, it's all one word. Get your vitamin D3 and your zinc. Totally free. Shipping and handling, got to pay. But you can get access to a War Room Defense Pack if you want to start to take the responsibility to boost your immune system. Nobody else is going to do it. No government, no friend, no community, just you. Okay? The work on oneself begins with oneself. This show is about human agency. Action, action, action. WarRoomDefense.com. Do it today. Okay. James O'Keefe has now been permanently banned, as we're finding out, from Twitter for putting out the CNN and Facebook hits, which are awesome. Join the club, James. It's not that bad. Actually, I was never on Twitter, but the show was. But they banned us for, guess what? Putting out the hard drive from hell that they now all say is true. Okay. Same thing with O'Keefe, putting out the CNN and the Facebook hits, all true. Those are executives. Can't have that. They're losing, though, ladies and gentlemen. This is what they do in a rearguard action. It's all coming apart for them. Josh Rogan's up there today big column saying, hey, the mainstream media is not going to be able to turn their eyes away too much longer to connect. This is Josh Rogin, to connect at the Washington Post, connect Fauci to the Wuhan lab and the funding of it. The individual in this city that's done the best job of that was a 19-year-old college student from the University of Chicago, Natalie Winter, the great investigative reporter at the National Pulse. She's got another 2 huge stories today we can't get into. One is about Jeffrey Sachs, that scumbag. We'll talk about that tomorrow, Natalie. Also, you've got another breaking huge takedown of Stacey Abrams and her involvement with the Chinese Communist Party. But I want to just ask you, because I know you're rushed for time, you got to give a speech tonight. I want your perspective on the Fauci-Jordan exchange today, since you probably know this guy as well as anybody except for Peter Navarro.
Well, my takeaway is that the CDC, the NIH, specifically Dr. Fauci, that numbers, facts, and data are not in their vernacular. But I think that there's 2 numbers that Dr. Fauci would be aware of, and that is 3.7 million. That is the $3.7 million of taxpayer money that he sent on a grant from the NIH entitled, quote, Understanding the Risk of Bat Coronavirus Emergence, that was sent to Peter Daszak at EcoHealth Alliance to collaborate with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The other number that I think he would know would be 2011, because that's when he wrote a very long op-ed for the Washington Post. It's called A Flu Virus Risk Worth Taking, where he advances a very, very long explanation and rationale as to why we should be pursuing gain-of-function research in the first place. After his discussion with Jim Jordan, I didn't even know it would be possible for Dr. Fauci to give an explanation, a rationale for any decision, because it seems like the CDC is just making up guidelines as they go along. But it's absolutely enraging. And I think maybe the reason why some of this communications advice coming out of the CDC, of the NIH, of Dr. Fauci is so bad is actually another story that we have up at the National Pulse today, which is that the deputy comms director for the COVID-19 response task force within the Biden White House actually has a host of old racist tweets where she actually calls to, quote, ban white people just from life in general. So it really is a messed up ecosystem there at the CDC. It's very politicized, despite the mainstream media telling you otherwise. And it's absolutely enraging that they have the right to take away, as Jim Jordan says, our civil liberties for so long when they can't even give us cold hard facts as to when we could get them back.
Yeah, it's a liberty thing, according to Fauci. Real quickly, you've got the Jeffrey Sachs story about the BBC up on National Pulse. You've also just published the Stacey Abrams piece about her involvement with this group with direct ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Can you tell us, and people got to go to National Pulse, what's your Twitter handle, Natalie?
I'm Natalie G. Winters on Twitter. Haven't been banned yet. Never know when. But this story about Stacey Abrams is really a bombshell report. In short, I'll tease it. It's worth reading. She's on the board for about 3 years now at the Center for American Progress, which we've highlighted extensively at the National Pulse for collaborating with a group known as the China United States Exchange Foundation, which is a Chinese Communist Party linked effort that, in their own words, according to Foreign Agent Registration Act's filings with the Department of Justice, they seek to, quote, effectively disseminate positive messages to the media, key influencers, and opinion leaders in the general public regarding the Chinese Communist Party. This group has taken trips and even co-authored reports alongside that group. Nonetheless, Stacey Abrams sees it fit to sit on their board and speak at their conferences, which is really concerning when you kind of understand the role that she has in the Democratic Party when it comes to shaping how we vote and, frankly, who we vote for.
Awful. Where are you going to talk tonight? Can people watch it online, or can they go and attend?
Yes, if you go to the Facebook page for the Metropolitan Republican Club of New York, I'll be speaking about the Chinese Communist Party and how they're infiltrating and subverting the United States, and probably some other fun things. It starts at 6 o'clock tonight, so if you want to go to their Facebook page, you can find it.
Natalie, we're going to get back to you tonight to get you on the show tomorrow morning. Thank you very much for joining us here. I know you got a rush day.
Thank you.
That's one of the young rising generation that's going to take on all comers. Okay, I want to turn now to David Clemens, New Mexico State University. Has done just amazing work. He was at the 7-hour conference that Michelle Bachmann put on. David, because you've got your hands on a lot of things, I just got to ask you, as a lawyer, you just saw the Jim Jordan, Dr. Fauci situation. Give us your observations on that.
Well, you and Dr. Navarro talked about constructs, and this is the old debate between security versus liberty. And Dr. Fauci is using this pandemic as their bludgeon for all discussions about liberty just need to go down the crapper. And this is close to home for me because when I teach my students, we have to talk about the differences between natural law and positive law. Positive law is simply this: whatever the government says or whatever your advisors say, you got to follow it. Doesn't matter if the law is just. It makes no room for whether the law is just, and that's what natural law is. And when we talk about the Constitution, when we talk about the Declaration of Independence, we're talking about documents that are trying to preserve liberty. And so Jim Jordan's got his fingers on the pulse. What happened to our liberties? What happened to our First Amendment rights? And you're seeing this in particular in all the states. In my particular state, my governor reauthorizes her own power every month, emergency power. The legislature's been cut out. So when you cut out the legislature, you cut out your representation, and the questions you raised are valid. We're 1 year into something that was supposed to last for 2 weeks. So I'm thrilled that he's making that argument. Fauci doesn't look good, that's for sure.
You're the guy that's put his hand on, I think you've read all the affidavits. You've done probably the deepest drill down of anybody that wasn't associated with a campaign on what happened on November 3rd. Given where things are, you've got Mike Lindell's coming out with a big report next week. You've got a forensic hand audit that's got 2.1 million ballots. It's just getting underway in Arizona. You got court cases up in Michigan with Antrim County. You've got down in Georgia. They're going to now look at facsimiles of the ballots and maybe lead to the whole ballots. Just pull the camera back for a second. Give our audience your sense of where we stand with really getting to the bottom of what happened on November 3rd and holding people accountable and having some justice about what happened. Not worried about just laws going in the future, but what happened on November 3rd and what are we going to do about it?
Well, to try to make this as simple as possible, Maricopa County is the key right now. We need one domino to drop, and if that happens, we can shine a light and perhaps have some arrests occur. There are people like Adrian Fontes, who was the previous Maricopa County recorder, who is cheering on lawsuits being filed by Dominion. That doesn't sound right to me. They've been stalling every effort to get audits of the physical ballots, and what your listeners need to understand was the promise to have Dominion get into these 28 states was, don't worry about using an electronic interface. There will always be the physical ballot behind that. And none of these counties have we seen those physical ballots offered up to be scanned. There hasn't been a real audit. So all eyes are on Maricopa County. Your audit will basically be broken down to two different phases, one with the physical ballots themselves. I think that's going to start on the 22nd. And then there's the digital audit on the machines themselves. And there is some controversy over that because of the decision to move those machines to the Coliseum. I'm doing some more research into some of the areas where that might be compromised. That's Arizona. Move over to Georgia. Jovan Pulitzer's involved in audit efforts there. He's trying to have another kinematic audit. There was a recent blow that was provided by Judge Amero, and Judge Amero there basically said, we're not going to let you scan the actual physical ballots. And that's troubling because, by way of analogy, everyone's concerned about the paper itself, the election ballots themselves. And so this is the equivalent of having someone photocopy, a counterfeit bill, and you're supposed to do forensic work there. You need the actual documents themselves, not photocopies. But people are watching very, very closely what's going on in Georgia. Hopefully we'll get a good result there. When we look at Michigan, Matt DePerno dropped all kinds of stuff our way with respect to unregistered ballots. Basically, these would be fake or fraudulent ballots. I think the tally in 9 counties was 66,000. So it's hard to keep up. Fraud everywhere.
Do you think, for our audience, I know there's people like you on this and obviously Mike Lindell, do you think, as we sit here in the middle of April, that we will get some answers of exactly what went on November 3rd, and then we can figure out who's held accountable and responsible. But do you believe that we're actually going to get to the truth?
I do. Now, we can't. I think we've got great people in Maricopa County. I think we've got eagle-eyed warriors looking at what's going on in Georgia. But desperate people can do desperate things, and that's what most of us are worried about. Bad actors, more ballots being shredded, more ballots being found at a dumpster, more fires just happening in the middle of the desert. But if we can remove that criminal element, we're going to get that information. I feel very confident about that.
David, you're one of the best and strongest voices in here. Can you give our audience, I want everybody in the audience to follow David on social media and go to his website. Can you give your social media coordinates and how people can follow you on your podcast and on your interviews and at your website?
Sure, you can find me at theprofessorsrecord.com, all one word, and on Telegram right now, The Professor's Record. I've been banned from YouTube. I think I was just reinstated, but I don't think I'm going to last more than another few days there with the stuff I'm putting up.
So you've got new information you're going to be putting up in the next couple of days?
Yes, sir.
David Clements, you're a warrior. Really appreciate you coming on the War Room One. Everybody in this posse, everybody out there listening, you've got to go. We're going to put it in the live chat. You got to follow Professor David Clements. Sir, thank you very much for joining us. Just want people to know that this fight continues, and we're winning. I know sometimes it looks cloudy, overcast. You're sitting there going, how can you say that? Because you can see the apparatus is starting to leak oil. They're starting to blow gaskets, okay? We've got to keep the pressure on every day, every hour of every day. Another hero, another warrior is going to join us after the break from Minnesota. An individual who's running for Attorney General, talking about law and order in the state of Minnesota. We're going to return to the War Room in a moment.
Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
No, we don't got no trouble. No. We don't. It's all peace, baby. It's all peace. It's all peace.
Holy. You mean? A bottle of water knocked you out? This nigga paying for the water.
I think earlier today out in Minnesota, I bring in now Doug Wardlaw, he's general counsel at MyPillow, but he's announced he's running for the Republican nomination for Attorney General, I think, of the state of Minnesota. Doug, thank you for coming. I think most people would say, do you want to have your head examined? But we know you're a patriot. I just have a question. Look, when people think of Minnesota, they think of nice people, kind of Fargo, the Minnesota nice, Wisconsin nice. But now we're in the, I don't know, it's the 8th or 9th month of riots and protests and places being burned down. What is going on in Minnesota? What's the problem? And what are you going to do about it if you are elected to be the Attorney General of that state?
Well, thanks for having me on, Steve. The terrible situation here in Minnesota really is the result of a failure of leadership by the most radical Attorney General in the country, Keith Ellison. And then our governor and other political leaders have totally failed to create a culture of lawfulness. They're encouraging a culture of lawlessness. But first, just let me say that my heart goes out, of course, to the family of Daunte Wright in the wake of his tragic death. It looks to be the result of a terrible mistake. But my heart also goes out to the families living in Brooklyn Center in fear over the last 4 nights of lawlessness and looting and rioting and violence. It's clear that the people that are destroying property and looting and rioting, they don't care about Daunte Wright or his family. They don't care about the people living in those communities. They seem to be there to foment violence, to create unrest. They've traveled here from other parts of the country in many cases. Many are self-identified members of Antifa. So what we're really witnessing is an insurrection against law and order, a continuing insurrection that's been going on since May, when Keith Ellison failed to do anything about the riots that led to the destruction and burning of the 3rd Precinct of the Minneapolis Police Department. So it's really quite a terrible situation. What we need is some strong leadership And I would, as Attorney General, do three things. If I was Attorney General right now, first of all, I would prosecute the ringleaders. Make sure that we're going after identifying and prosecuting the ringleaders of the riots, the people that are coming in to foment violence, the members of Antifa who are here to create unrest and push forward this general insurgency against law and order. We need to identify them, prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. Sporadic arrests are not enough. It's not enough just to arrest people and release them or slap them on the wrists. That's not enough. We need to set examples, make examples, and create a culture of lawfulness, restore a culture of lawfulness. Secondly, I would put pressure on mayors and city officials to do their jobs, to actually support their local police departments, to fund them, to make sure that their communities are safe. And we can do that by suing them if necessary, because some city charters require that there be certain levels of police staffing, going after them whenever they break the law, and calling them out when they do things that are unethical, and just using the bully pulpit of the Attorney General's office to provide that leadership and send a clear message that due process is important and that law and order is important. And then, thirdly, directly support the police from the Office of the Attorney General. And that means training police so that they can do their jobs effectively and efficiently. And so those are kind of the three things that I would do right away.
Let me ask you about that last point, because Minnesota's got a reputation being very progressive, very liberal. The whole issue of backing police, but the training. I mean, both of these situations. And look, courts are going to decide on the first case, I guess next week sometime. You've got the other officer that just got charged. But one thing that jumps out of the page, jumps off these videos, is the quality of training and the quality of leadership in the law enforcement part, in the police part. What would you do as AG there?
We got to go in there and we got to work with the police to make sure that they have proper leadership, make sure that they actually have training, specific training on how to do their jobs, review police procedures, make sure everything squares with the law, and make sure that police officers have all the support that they need to do their job. Because a lot of this problem is happening because there is so much pressure on the police right now. There is so much anger directed at the police, and that's because we've got an Attorney General who has a very strong anti-police bias. This is the Attorney General who previously he supported Sarah Jane Olson. He rallied and raised money for Sarah Jane Olson, who is a domestic terrorist who was convicted of putting pipe bombs under cop cars. So we're really reaching a point here of really civilizational breakdown. And we need to send, as a society, a strong message that violence will not be tolerated, lawlessness will not be tolerated. And we also, another thing, we need to make sure that we're sending the message that there is just one rule of law for everybody. Because, Keith Ellison, he seems to be content with selectively enforcing the law. They're calling to defund the police. That's easy for Keith Ellison and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib to call for because they have plenty of security. But they seem to be content with enforcing the law selectively. So Ellison takes over the prosecution of Officer Derek Chauvin with respect to the George Floyd death, but then he hasn't bothered to take over a single prosecution. He hasn't prosecuted a single person for looting or for rioting. And this really points to a really large problem, the breakdown of the rule of law, because if the laws aren't enforced, or if they're enforced only to suit political objectives or only to advance ideological objectives, then you don't have law at all. Law becomes a tool of oppression.
Look, if I look at some of the Antifa crowd, some of the BLM crowd, some of these protesters, and I think they're touting it, a lot of those people are not Minnesota natives. They don't live in Minnesota. There are people coming across state lines. Has the U.S. attorneys, don't they have a responsibility? What would you do with the U.S. attorneys? Think the Biden, even the Trump administration, either the Trump administration or the Biden administration, has the DOJ and the local U.S. attorneys, have they got tiger teams on this or their task force on this? Or, I mean, there's one thing for the Attorney General, but what would you do to get the U.S. attorneys and the federal government involved there?
Well, right. We absolutely need to be working with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I think if we provide leadership at the state level, we're going after people and work with the U.S. Attorney's Office to make sure that they're doing the same thing. Right now, I haven't seen any indication of tiger teams or any kind of concerted effort from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They do, however, have billboards still up, digital billboards in Minneapolis, calling for people to give information on the January 6th insurrection, they call it, and riot in Washington, D.C. So they're very focused on that. But in terms of actually dealing with this local insurrection and the breakdown of law and order that's affecting so many Minnesotans and people across this country, I see very little going on.
Doug, how do people get access to learn more about you?
Well, please go to DougWardlowAG.com, DougWardlowAG.com to volunteer and to donate. We really need that early support so we can make sure we defeat Keith Ellison, the most radical, extreme Attorney General of the country, and help restore law and order, not just here in Minnesota, but across this country.
Doug, thank you very much for joining us today in the War Room.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, tomorrow we've got another jam-packed show. Speaking of the Justice Department, they decided not to go forward and to prosecute even consider a further investigation of the officer that gunned down the Air Force veteran in the Capitol on January 6th that Doug was just talking about. Also, we got more breaking news in the Vatican. We're going to have Natalie Winters here. We're going to talk more about the Wuhan lab. Tomorrow morning will be a jam-packed show. Make sure you're there 10 a.m. to noon. Looking forward to it. We're going to make a special announcement what we're going to do on Saturday. Very special Saturday show coming up. Stephen K. Bannon for the entire team, Real America's Voice and the War Room. See you tomorrow morning, 10 a.m.